The White Fields, Mystic Dreams Anthology. Story by Ayed Hindi. Part 2. Chapter 7. First Dream. The Ship. Robert started telling his first dream experienced as a young child. It was a sunny day in the garden. I was very young and jolly happy, galloping around the goalpost and playing and kicking the ball around in our home grassy lawn. My dad called me and gave me a gift, a toy ship, and my mother came and brought me a small water pool in the garden and filled it with water from the garden hose pipe. Then I was more delighted when I dropped the ship into the water and it started floating inside the pool. While I was leaning on the water pool side, pushing and watching the ship move on the water surface, all of a sudden, I fell into the pool and I found myself in a huge pool of cold, salty water. The waves were battering me as I was barely floating, and my hands were struggling and trying to keep myself above the water. I was alone, and no one was around me. Then I saw that the small ship had turned into a very big cruising ship. I tried swimming towards that endless insight cruise ship, but it was sailing fast away from me. I saw my dad and my mother standing on that ship. I pleaded with them and shouted, "Help me, Daddy. Please help me, Mummy." However, the ship kept cruising, had gone far away into the horizon, and later disappeared from my vision. I looked around me, seeking any help or anything I could hold my body on, but there was nothing I could hang on to in the middle of that sea of water. I kept swimming aimlessly and looking for the land, any dry land. Nothing seemed around me but the never-ending sight of water. Then I saw a boat being driven towards me, a paddling wood boat. I swam towards it, and when I reached that boat, I pulled myself up and jumped into it. I was naked, tired, and shivering from the blistering cold. My mouth was bitingly dry and yearning for any drinking water, but there was nothing on that boat, not even the paddles to sail away. I sat on the bottom of the boat, confused, and asked myself, "Where am I? Why has my mother left me?" I screamed and screamed, but all in vain. No one is listening and never will. I saw a flock of birds flying above me. Then I started pushing the boat with my hands in the water and followed the bird's path, hoping for dry land. Then, after an exhausting effort, I saw from a distance a harbor crammed with moored ships, an old broken ship. I pulled yet harder going forward and eventually reached that forlorn port riding the waves, and it gently brought me near the docks. I hopped over and laid on a floating wooden dock between the broken ships. No one was there. The only thing I saw was a rotten sign with the name The Cozy End, and I kept hearing the crackling noise of the wooden ships. It was devoid of any living humans or animals. It was a forsaken place. I could hear creaking, mewing, and roaring noises around me. It became dark. I was very tired, thirsty, and scared. I lay on my back on that wooden path, and then I could not move my body anymore, paralyzed in my body and soul. I became motionless and frozen. I looked up into the sky above me. There were no stars and no light at all. Pitchy dark in that immense vault. I'm perplexed and stuck. I told myself, then everything around me turned into red, a shimmering red startling light in the sky above me, and gradually increased that glowing red light and curtailed the whole surroundings. Where to hide? I asked myself. Then, all of a sudden, appeared a huge ball of fire. Robert looked at the candle. The flame was still glowing, but the text on his phone remained there. He continued to tell the next dream. Chapter 8. Second Dream. The Torment. Robert started telling his second dream experienced as child. "Good night, dear," Mummy said to me when I was lying in bed. She switched off the light and closed the door behind her, and I was left alone in my bedroom. I went to sleep, but suddenly I heard a noise, and then the bed was shaking ruthlessly. I wanted to remove the covers, but I couldn't. I'm being enveloped. My hands and my legs were tied and shackled. I could not move them anymore. Then I was pulled upside down forcibly, and my head was dangling like a ball. I screamed without a voice. I shouted, but I couldn't. Then the light turned on, and I saw myself in front of a massive mirror. I was naked and fastened with rings. I had lost all of my hair, my eyebrows, and all of my eyelashes. I looked wrinkled and brittle, awful. I told myself. Then they placed me in a plastic bag. I couldn't breathe. They put the sealed bag into a dark, hot enclosure and poured warm liquids on me. I endured the heat sensation as they started shaking me extremely hard and banging my head with brutal force without mercy. Then I felt dizziness and was later unconscious after that heavy battering. Yet I was awakened when they turned on the light again, removed the plastic bag, and poured cold water on me. I was shocked, distraught, and deflated by this unbearable, horrifying interrogation. I've kept trying to unchain myself, but all went in vain and utter failure. I begged for my freedom and for letting me go. Instead, they took my body out and suspended me bare in the sun's light. I couldn't hide from that burning stream of light cutting through my chained body. Parts of my skin started flapping, and I couldn't resist the pain. The torment that I'm suffering from is intolerable. I might deserve all that's happening right now for me. It's a grievous trial as death becomes a dear wish. I yelled at myself, then all of a sudden, I felt a heavy hand poking my shoulders very hard, and I heard my mother's voice ringing in my ears, "Son, wake up, let's go." I was entirely surprised and shocked to be awakened from my sleep in this manner, and I answered her, "Where are we going, mother? It's late at night and dark out there." She was very tense and replied, yelling in anger, "We must run away and leave home now, son. Don't you smell the smoke? Everything around us is burning like hell is unleashing upon us. We're surrounded. Have a look out from the window. Oh, it's past time now." She opened the window and pulled me from my pajamas and said, "Jump." And I didn't hesitate and scaled the window in haste and placed my body outside in the open. While she was holding my hands tight, I descended the wall gradually, and then I dropped myself after she let my hands go. I landed on the lawn, and forth I stood up from the fall and heard my mother saying, "Run." I ran off bare feet and dressed in my scanty pajamas. It was stern cold and dark ahead, but I kept running. Then I stopped and looked back. Our entire house was consumed by fire. Asterisk. Robert looked again at the candle. The flame was still glowing, but the text on his phone remained there. He continued to tell the next dream. Chapter 9. Third dream. Wishful desire. Robert started telling his third dream experienced in his adolescence. Woof, woof. The dog was barking while I'm pulling my bicycle through the home entrance, and I said, "No dog. I can't take it out now because I'm going to school. Bye." I shut the house front door, hoped over my bicycle, and began the journey towards book-stretched Lace High School. It was cold and drizzly, but most notably, it was quiet for a Friday morning in our random roller street, which is usually a busy morning. Never mind, I told myself, and I kept riding until I reached my school gates. It was closed. No one was there. Where are my friends? I asked myself. I waited for a while, but no one came over and joined me. Then I went towards a park next to the school and decided to spend the time waiting for my friends while cycling around the park until the school was open. There were people in South Reddish Park walking their dogs and looking at me in wonderment, but I ignored them and kept doing rounds of cycling in the park until I heard someone calling my name, and I stopped and looked over. It's Lewis, my gorgeous angel and my schoolmate. She was walking her dog in the park, and she looked baffled at me and asked curiously, "What are you doing in here wearing a school uniform on Saturday morning?" I replied, "It's Friday." She looked at me, smiling with her pretty eyes. "You're making fun of me, aren't you?" I said, "No, I dare not." Then she came close to me and asked, "Tell me then, why are you wearing the school uniform on Saturday?" I felt sarcasm in her tone. She was doubting that there was something behind my presence in the park, but I was embarrassed to tell her. Eventually, I mustered my remaining courage and said, "It's a bet. Yes, I put a wager with my pals." She started laughing and came even closer to me and said, "I can't see any of your friends around here in the park except for me." I scratched my head and I told her, "Well, at least their parents are here walking their dogs, and I've already noticed the astonishment upon them seeing me this morning wearing a uniform on a bicycle. I made many rounds around the park, so they'll tell my friends for sure." She pulled the dog leash and told me, "I'm going home, and I'll dress in my school uniform too and join your bet. All right?" I said, "No, please." I was lying. I really thought it was Friday. Sorry. I was embarrassed, and I couldn't tell the truth. There is no bet at all. She smiled again and said, "You don't want to share the prize with me, don't you?" My mind started rolling inside my head, and I answered, "I want to share everything with you, dear." She touched my hand and said, "Then you came this very morning to see me. You knew it's Saturday and I'm walking the dog in the park, you shy boy, aren't you?" I blathered, and I couldn't utter a word. However, she didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed my hands and said, "Let's go there and sit behind the bushes. Leave your bicycle here, and I'll chain the dog on the wheel. Shall we?" We went and sat on the lawn behind the shrubbery. We stared at each other. Then she told me, "I've never been on a date before I met you today. So sweat?" I've tried, but I couldn't replay. Then something caught my eye. Oh, I think I've seen my mother in the park. Probably she is searching for me. She turned her head and looked between the bushes to see, and then she said, "No, that is my mother. She'll find out the dog is untended." I was at a loss, and I said, "Do we have the same mother?" I looked around me, but there was no one. She had left, and I was all by myself. Was she ever with me? Or I've been all alone imagining? Was it all snare and delusion? I queried myself thoroughly, and while I was dumbstruck deep in my thoughts, I've seen rows of hands clapping emerge out of nowhere, only hands without bodies or heads clapping in tandem that I can see, and were all branched out of the lawn. I stood up hastily and ran towards my bicycle, grabbed it, and went for a ride back home when I suddenly heard a strong thudding noise. I looked around, and there was a car accident. The whole car was in flames. Robert checked the candle. The flame is still glowing, but the text on his phone remains there. He continued to tell the next dream. Chapter 10. Fourth dream. Into the white fields. Robert started telling his fourth dream experienced in his early adulthood. I was looking outside through the windows of my university dorm room. It was an evening after my solo dinner. The green Clementine road under the windows was bustling. The cars were passing by slowly, and the people were moving in all directions with different strides, parading their very existence. However, my pokey place was gripped with the music streamed off my radio. Nevertheless, I'm feeling sad and lonely, severed away from my nest whence I was nurtured and loved by everyone around me in the past. Now I'm surrounded by boorish, cruel, and selfish humans, occupied by vainglorious, wallowed indifference towards each other, and devoid of empathy. I ended up receiving a blank stare from the deadpan heads of the people I ran across all the time, but still, I was consigned to this dark cell and subdued into believing the promise that suffering for my ambitions would pay dividends at the end. Nonsense, even if I'm lying in my cramped, dirty bed. It won't relieve my confused mind and ease off my raging emotions. I was coerced into watching every evening the shadows of random people moving on my room's ceiling. Those reflections are screened and projected as the specters of the extant. Yet, it's never real, touchable, or even intelligible. It's absurd. Where are you, mother and father? You left me a long time ago. I can't even say goodbye. Who can listen and understand what is on my mind? You've gone and disappeared without saying goodbye. I waited very long and got no call back. Not anymore. Oh, that damn radio kept on broadcasting while I'm obliged to listen to whatever streamed off in my solitary cave. I was upset and shouted, "You're fake too, radio? You never tell the truth, never cared, forever changing, always forcing my mind with uninvited opinions." Then I decided I had enough and went out for a walk after ending an inner struggle of regret and anguish. It's night. The darkness outside is less than mine on the inside. I reached the hollow Meadow urban garden late at night and walked through its ghostly paths under faint light emanating from a few scattered lamp posts in my way. I sat on a wet wooden bench, staring at a willow tree standing tall, yards away from me. Anxiety and fear have no place in my sick, devoid heart. For death is never a wish. For all time, it's a destiny for everyone. I yearn for you, tree. You're on your own, carrying on with all the burdens. You'll be my refuge for now, my end of the loop. I'll climb on you like a squirrel, and you'll never mind another encroacher. I went up on the willow tree and found a thick branch that can hold me while I'm gazing towards the lights, the city lights around me. Those lights are shining but exude not the real light. I'm longing for the light that shines inside me, yet my pursuit is complete without a triumph. I can't find it in this unredeemed world, but I'm certain of its existence beyond this deception. No, I didn't hear a standing ovation for my late night speech. Snapping and groaning noise, moments of silence. I feel the intensity of the light passing into my body and my soul. It's burning the inside of me. It's a painfully pleasurable experience I'm going through. I was wrapped and pulled into a never-ending luminous tunnel, surrounded by flashing beams of white light, moving yet into an unwavering path towards the end of my destiny. It's becoming me. It's the real me. I am free and roaming into the brilliant white fields. The night sky was enlightened, and the darkness has faded out from passing meteors. Asterisk. Robert looked again at the candle. The flame was still glowing, but the text on his phone remained there. He continued to tell the next dream. Chapter 11. The fifth dream. The Bright Legion. Robert started telling his fifth dream experienced in his early adulthood. It was extremely foggy while I was momentarily stationed at the white pinnacle among the cloud. After I'd been lifted with massive wings through the spiral conundrum, then all of a sudden, the fog disappeared like a passing morning mist, and the never-ending beauty emerged and was all in my sight. Infinite tranquility all around me. I can fly and hover everywhere, though I'm starting to hear continuous, dense sounds of fighting, a hissing and whooshing noises followed by a roar and thunder. Nevertheless, I felt immense strength in me after I emerged from the iron gate, and I wanted to join in that battle. Yet I couldn't discern any friends or foes in this seemingly brutal struggle until I heard a clapping voice in front of me. Draftee, you've joined the Bright Vadriel Legion. It's a blessing and a privileged honor bestowed upon you to be among the elite forces of heaven. Our wars are infinite, and there is no truce or abatement against evil forces in our world. We are all the time the victorious. Never mind that our foes' numbers are in multitude and outmatching ours by the 100 times. We cannot lose and we shall not. Our power is imperishable. Never fear. There is no death beyond death. It's only one step. You bring your foes into submission and obedience with your preponderance and the great strength you've been bequeathed. You'll chain them, and they shall be yours for everlasting time. You'll be their eternal Lord. Judge and punish them as you wish. The wiser you are, the higher your ascendancy shall be to the divine. The foe's incessant arrivals in droves shall not dissipate our unending resolve. You'll start now and collect your serfs from the new influxes and pesky intruders. They will carry on the burden of the heavy chains, and you will fight on with your mighty weapons. The more serfs you acquire, the more chains they shall hold, and the more of your foes shall be subject to your lordship. You'll have your own army of serfs that rules and dominates in your own domain. There is no sympathy or mercy towards our enemies whatsoever. Though you have been given the power of emancipation, and you can release any of your serfs at your own choice after reconciliation, the freed ones will be joining the other legions, and you will rule by the eternal divine law. Then, shall we begin your reign, bright officer? I can't wait anymore. I am fortunate to be among the elite forces, I replied, and added, once I received my ultimate weapon, the sodding catenary, and I'm being prepared to enter the battles. Upon being transmitted towards the gates of eternity, I can clearly detect and observe the influx of the infidels and the treacherous pouring in waves. I know now which side I am fighting for. The celestial dragon legion that protects the heavens. I set myself up and held the mesh high so they were all entangled and trapped inside that net. There is no way for the course of sifting and passing through. Onward, I chained the first serf, followed by the second, and kept on until I had my first war battalion of serfs at my command. My heavenly army is being formed in a blink of an eye. I am truly a lord. It is my ultimate pleasure. I am at the forefront of my supreme delight. Asterisk. Robert looked again at the candle. The flame was still glowing, but the text on his phone remained there. He continued to tell the next dream. Chapter 12. Sixth Dream. The Victorian Horror. Robert started telling his sixth dream experience in his adulthood. I left my office in the evening at the end of my dismal working day. I walked and crossed through Darngrove High Street, aiming for the North Bubble Tube Station, on my usual way of going back home. This daily routine was a grim and dreary mood that permeated my feelings in spite of the ample colored neon signs everywhere flashing over the shop's display. While I was crossing that high street, I've noticed that all my few friends have gathered at the local pub to drink, so I decided what was best for me was to avoid going there. And instead of continuing my walk on that same street, I chose to escape into a side residential road and ventured my way through the staked rows of humble terraced houses on a longer stretch towards the tube station. Here was still the remaining light emanating from the evening dusk. Nothing unusual to see around that pesky road. Just an old Victorian-style home built probably more than a century ago. It was rather a calm and quiet walk, and while I was submerged in my own thoughts, a door was opened from one of the houses I was passing by, and a beautiful, well-rounded woman wearing a colorful tight dress popped out, and with a frowning face, she asked me, "What are you doing here?" I was surprised to hear such a question, but I ignored that request and continued walking through. She followed me. Then another front door was opened, and a young man appeared with a glowered face and asked me angrily, "What are you doing here?" I never answered. He followed me too. I thought it's a trap, as both creatures are following me closely. I was in panic and started running as much as I could, and they did the same behind me. I'm certain now that I've been snared and chased, and someone wants to hurt me for reasons that are beyond me at that moment. I kept on running as the road seemed without any visible end, while I'm hearing their heavy steps approaching me. I urgently needed an exit of any sort, but there is no way out of that never-ending road. Then I've seen a massive house with the front door left ajar. I went promptly in without thinking and locked the door behind me. I was panting, sweating, and trembling while they were knocking hard at that very door. I found myself in a white, empty lobby. I opened another door on the opposite side, and that led me into a long, white, bare corridor with two different directions. The hanging light bulb was on. I closed the second door behind me, and the sounds of knocking had disappeared, but I started hearing moaning and groaning voices. I wondered, is it a hospital? I needed urgent help and shelter from the pursuers, so I took the right direction of the corridor and traversed through until it ended with yet another door. I opened it, and it was a surgery room. The surgeons were busy operating on a patient, and the very woman who was chasing me on the street is now lying on the operating table. A nurse dressed in a light blue gown approached me and asked, "Do you want to join the team and save the life of this injured woman?" I said, "What do you mean?" I didn't wait any more and ran away, and I went towards the other end of the corridor, but there appeared to be more passages and more doors. It was confusing in the middle of the door's mayhem, but I had no choice. I opened a door, and it was another surgery room. The surgeons were also busy operating on the very man who was chasing me, and again, a nurse came and asked me if I wanted to help save this man's life. I declined at once and ran away, trying to find my way back towards the first door I came through into the corridor, but it's a maze of white corridors. How would I find my way out of here? I bit my right hand hard till bleeding and started marking the dead-end passages with my blood until eventually, after many trials and loss of blood, I found the right door towards the lobby, knowing that both chasers were immobile and couldn't follow me anymore. With a blink of an eye, I decided it's best to go back towards the high street again and forget everything I've just witnessed. I immediately went out of that horror house and headed back, looking into the faraway, flashing lights of the lively shops on the street. All of a sudden, I heard yelling. I looked back, and I'd seen my friends running towards me. I ran and shouted, "I can't save anyone, not even myself." I fell to the ground, and my head hit the concrete curb. I was bleeding, and I felt my clothes were burning. The same nurse from the house came and asked me, "Do you need help, sir?" I said, "Yes, please. I'm on fire." Asterisk. Chapter 13th. New Life. Robert looked for the last time at the candle on the altar. As soon as he was done telling all of his past 6 nights' dreams and the flame was still glowing, he couldn't envisage how he was able to tell all his priory dreams from childhood to adulthood with accuracy in such a short span of time. But it's likely been imprinted on his mind during the past 6 nights. Was it his own dreams or belongs to someone else's? And then he took the urn and retreated from that altar while checking his phone, and he found out that the text had finally disappeared. It was a successful conclusion to the conscience's trial. Robert pursued himself while crossing the river Maritsa on his way back towards the other side of the hill, where Vasil was still waiting for him. Then Robert opened the urn and started scattering his son's ashes around the oak tree and into the field. He was at the time overwhelmed with sadness and despair because he parted with the remains of his late son. But the relief for Robert was the thought that his son would rest in a holy place was on his mind. Yet there was an unusual sight, or what he assumed was an apparition, of people moving aimlessly in the field in white clothes. Or it might be a sad hallucination phenomenon after long tormented suffering endured throughout the test. They didn't stay any longer and went back as fast as they could towards Belovo town. After spending the remainder of the night at the hotel in Belovo town, Robert returned to Sofia by train. In his hired studio, Robert arranged for his belongings to leave the property after expiring his timely tenure. Though he felt lonely without the urn that had accompanied him for a long time during his trips through foreign countries and different regions, he is satisfied that the remains of his late son are finally rested in a good place, close to Heaven's Gate. Once he was done packing his luggage, he stood up by the window, looking over the bustling city again for the last time, and told himself, "My journey here has now come to an end after I've been on healing therapy course. Soon thereafter, the return trip will commence. It's the final steps of redeeming myself through traveling to a unique and mystic place. I could not continue struggling with my conscience. Yesterday's experience was more than unburdening. Yet, one thing I have learned is that a peaceful conscience is a dead one, but there is no perishing soul. That's what it means for myself. I hope everyone will understand once they read my letter I wrote, and it would be left here. I could not continue struggling with my conscience. I've lost the fight with myself. That's it." The Bulgarian police found Robert dead body in the flat after they forced their way into the place upon request from the landlord. Robert has died as a result of committing suicide by hanging himself using a rope attached to a metal hook in the ceiling of the living room. The police removed the Robert body, his items, and the letter on the desk. They issued death certificate and sent his body back to London, United Kingdom. In his hometown, the coroner identified Robert body, determined the cause of death, and put his name on the dead record. Robert was posthumously charged with the murder and causing death of his late wife by arson, a criminal damages, a fraud and false representation. The case was closed without trial, and the coroner ordered to issue Robert's letter to the public record where Robert confessed and admit his guilt. Letter transcript. To whom it may concern. I am writing this letter voluntarily as I am fully aware and understand the consequences of my own actions. Hereby I submit my sincere apologies for the wrong and sinful acts I have committed in the past. I was deeply struggling with heavy burdens laid upon my conscience for many years over the fact that I inadvertently caused the death of my beloved late wife, which was resulted from the heinous act of setting fire into my home for the purpose of collecting funds from my insurance claim. I was desperate for any money to cover the huge amount of debts accumulated over a period of time during my gambling addiction insanity. This is not a justification by any means for my own awful deeds. I'm simply telling the events that led to my own late wife demise. I am deeply regretting the suffering I inflicted upon my dear son, over blaming him all the time for his mother's death, by harboring the thought that she was late to exit and leave the premises in time after she tried to save him from the fire I perpetrated and triggered. I was gravely wrong. and I felt the trials of guilt hanging over me all the time. I was quivering and devastated with emotions of anguish and anxiety when I went through my son's dreams on the altar in the past day, and I regret deeply losing him as early as I never cared and failed to understand the torment he went through in the short period of time of his life after the loss of his mother. The light emanated from the fire of the candle on that magical altar in a strange country has enthralled my soul and guided me towards the only path in my life I should have endeavored long time ago, is to reveal the truth. I thank everyone who helped me throughout my last journey, and I thank in particular Vasil for the opportunity he offered me to visit the fascinating white fields. I ask forgiveness from you, my wife, and from you, my son. I came to terms, although late, that life is not worth it without you both beside me, and I decided to join you in your eternal rest. One thing I have learned: a peaceful conscience is a dead one. Robert. P.S. The documents concerning the death of my wife and my son are in the black leather bag on the table in the bedroom. Please hand it over to the British police. Hashtag the end.